Hello everyone and welcome to Kamiak Butte. My name is Tressa and I will be walking you through the ins and outs of everything that you might need to know about Kamiak Butte in Palouse, Washington. Kamiak Butte is located in eastern Washington and named after a very famous Yakima chieftain. Kamiak Butte was formed anywhere from about 1.47 to 1.4 million years ago. Primarily made of quartzite and basalt, there were many contributing factors that went to forming this underappreciated rock formation, starting all the way from studying the continental drifts to understanding how plate tectonics and volcanoes help deposit rocks and minerals to the butte, to finally understanding how wind can contribute to this deposition as well. Along with the history of Kamiak Butte was formed, the climate and landscape also work hand in hand to shape the biotic and abiotic factors that live and function in Kamiak Butte. The supercontinental drift theory was a groundbreaking theory that explained the hows and whys of major continents on Earth shifting over time. Proposed by Alfred Wegener in 1912, his theory at first was denied by other scientists until finally being accepted after his passing. However, he had the right idea but the wrong science behind it, when it was actually finally proved that plate tectonics were the reason behind the continental shifts over time, such as Pangea. There are many types of plate tectonics and the processes that succeed them. In a subduction zone, there are two continental plates that meet, and one bends and slides under the other to deposit into the mantle. The oceanic crust is the crust which slides under the continental crust because the continental crust is much lighter. Many types of earthquakes are caused from subduction zone crashes, such as if two continental crusts were to collide, the friction would cause a disruption which would end as an earthquake. Volcanoes are caused by plate tectonics. When two plate tectonics collide and slide into the hot magma, it releases hot fluids, which melt the overlying crust and create magma, which then rises and slowly forms a volcanic structure over time. Approximately 55 million years ago, the Farallon Plate collided with what is now known as North America and left a trail of volcanoes and mountains behind it. This is now where Kamiak Butte is located, among these mountains and volcanoes which were created by plate tectonic movement. Granite is defined as the light-colored igneous rock with grains large enough to be seen with the naked eye. A very common rock found after volcanic activity, it is now found throughout Kamiak Butte due to the Idaho batholith that occurred around 85 to 65 million years ago. At a closer look at the Kamiak Butte, scientists had found sea floor quartzite. How did a state that's about 500 miles from the nearest coast acquire an oceanic mineral? Scientists have contemplated many different situations that may have caused this, but determined it must have been transported from a very powerful tsunami thousands of years ago, picking up the quartzite and carrying it to its furthest reaching points and depositing it there. The majority of the Palouse, which is the surrounding area around Kamiak Butte, is built off the Columbia River basalt, formed about 17.5 million years ago. As water levels began to drop, the volcanic activity took over and covered much of the west coast with organic materials such as basalt. As basalt is a hard rock formed over time that is difficult to erode, the Kamiak Butte stands about 3,600 feet in elevation. Much of these ancient rocks are still around today. With much of the surrounding area having lower elevation and therefore being more prone to water erosion, the Kamiak Butte is a special landmark that still holds much of its ancient basalts and many other landmarks. The climate of Kamiak Butte defines what organisms can live there today, as with any region or area. Each layer of the atmosphere contributes to its climate, along with many other outside factors, including the water cycle and the wind cycle. However, climate and weather are different. Climate is the weather in any given area over a long period of time, while weather is the temperature, precipitation, cloudiness, humidity, and more in a span of 24 hours. An air mass is a large body of air being pushed around the atmosphere at all times, transporting warm, cold, dry, or humid air depending on where the air mass originates from. The birthplace region for an air mass is either called continental, which forms over lands, or maritime, which forms over oceans, and has four names which express the temperature of the birthplace of the regions. These are polar, Arctic, tropical, and equatorial, demonstrating the temperature of the air that you can expect to arrive. With each air mass moving over different areas, most places can typically expect the same weather patterns from these bodies of air. However, air masses can make slight changes which bring unfamiliar temperatures with them. Kamiak Butte, for example, will typically have a marine polar and continental polar air mass blowing over it, causing a mostly cold, wet climate, but sometimes will receive a continental tropical air mass that will bring spurts of warm, dry air with it. Kamiak Butte gets a lot of regular precipitation. Precipitation is defined as the quantity of water deposited. In general, Kamiak Butte receives a regular rain and snow in the winter months, and from this table, you can see that January, February, November, and December get the largest amount of precipitation, receiving up to 2.5 inches. Along with many other contributing factors, the precipitation has a large effect on the temperature of Kamiak Butte, as shown in this table. Temperatures rarely rise above 70 to 75 degrees Fahrenheit in warmer months, but have been known to dip below freezing in winter months. The topography of a general area affects climate a lot as well. For instance, mountains can both trap or block cold or warm fronts from coming in, canyons could force certain temperatures to hang around longer than others, and plateaus allow temperatures to be carried in and out with ease. The mountains at Kamiak Butte play a large part in its climate by creating microclimates, climates in small condensed areas, rain shadows, and precipitation. These mountains are a key role in how Kamiak Butte functions on a day-to-day basis. Elevation is also a key role to Kamiak Butte's known fame, sitting at over 3,600 feet, creating the second highest point in Whitman County, which allows more precipitation and more cold air to influence the climate of this area. A biome is a large area characterized by its vegetation, soil, climate, and wildlife. In North America, we are very diverse, and we have many different types of biomes, from Arctic tundras to deserts and grasslands, and even temperate rainforests. Being one of the most diverse continents in the world, we have many different plants and animals that live here according to their biome needs. Shrublands, which is what Kamiak Butte it falls under, can not only be found throughout North America, but also worldwide. They are most distinctly compared to deserts with very hot, dry summers, reaching into and past 100 degrees Fahrenheit, with very cold, dry winters down past 30 degrees Fahrenheit. Shrublands are called shrublands for a very obvious reason. They are overflowing with shrub-like plant structures. With many shrubs and short trees in this area, these plants thrive in rocky areas with patches of grass placed throughout. With not receiving much rain, due to being much like a desert, the plants here have adapted to being able to store water with very small needle-like leaves. Shrublands can be found in Washington, California, Texas, Southern Europe, South America, South Africa, and Southwest Australia. There are many contributing abiotic factors that help shape Kamiak Butte into what it is today. Wind, soil, rock slides, forest fires, animal diseases, erosion, overgrazing, and overharvesting trees are all major components that affect day-to-day life in Kamiak Butte. Wind and erosion work together to shape big-picture movements of the soil and other natural formations, including rock slides, and forest fires and diseases can wipe out entire populations of ecosystems. Human activity of farming and harvesting can both negatively and positively affect the surrounding area, depending on how it is done. The land is primarily made of quartzite rock and loess soil, transported from great floods 10,000 years ago. When arriving at Kamiak Butte, you will notice one huge differential factor in the ecosystem. The north side and the south side are very different from one another. The north side is full of lush shrubs, moss-laden ground, and a variety of trees and many different signs of wildlife, while the south side is much drier with less shrubbery and trees. The north side, there are a variety of small ecosystems swimming in the area. There are three main trees: ponderosa pine, larch and Douglas fir, and even some dispersed and possibly accidental trees. As seen from this table, the ponderosa pine trees vary in diameter from sizes about 14 inches to 29 inches, and the average height is about 34 feet. There are many other plants living in the north side, including moss, lichen, ninebark, and even forms of fungus with different kinds of mushrooms that can be found. such as ghost pipe. The south ridge is the much drier of the two sides, which leads to having less flora and fauna. When reaching the crest or the summit of Kamiak Butte, the trees slowly thin out and new plant life arise. With one of the first things that may be seen is the small wild flowers and forbs that pock the hillsides with flecks of purple, yellow, and white. Another plant that may be seen is what's called a serviceberry, an almost tree-like looking shrub that stands about 20 feet, that produces a berry that is a favorite among herbivores. Without the many trees blocking the sun, the plethora of sunlight discourages moss and lichen to grow in these areas, promoting more grass instead. With the north side of Kamiak Butte being covered with trees, this creates a lot of competition for sunlight. On the north side, you'll notice branches with only needles on the top. This is to catch sunlight around the competing trees. With very little sunlight able to hit lower areas to the ground, it is unnecessary to spend energy on needles and lower branches when little to no sunlight will reach them anyways. For low-lying ground plants, they mainly rely on small amounts of sunlight along with constant moisture to sustain themselves. As well as sunlight competition, deer, elk, and moose may overgraze certain plants that may adversely affect future growing seasons. If using serviceberry as an example, this plant may have grown throughout the area years ago, but being a favorite among these animals creates overgrazing, which has made it harder for the plant to release seeds and therefore adversely affects the season's growth patterns. Meanwhile, wildfires ravage the West Coast every summer. In fact, many people know summer as smoke season in this area. In 2020 alone, the fire season in Washington state burned over 273,000 acres of land. Not only do wildfires cause damage, but so do extreme weather patterns. Extreme wind and extreme rain have been known to hit the Palouse, and both can cause adverse effects on the area. Extreme wind can uproot trees and cause them to crash into others, and most of these trees are known to be homes to owls, woodpeckers, squirrels, and other small critters, and the fallen trees can hurt these families heavily. Extreme rain can cause rock slides that can roll over or into in-ground animal homes, as well as potentially hitting them or uprooting plants that are homes to insects and other animals. The mule deer, or also known as the black-tailed deer, is a deer commonly found in the Pacific Northwest, but also all the way up to Canada and Alaska. They are typically known as the mule deer as their ears are extremely large and pointed, much of that similar to a mule, and black-tailed due to their black-tipped tails. There are 11 different subspecies of mule deer that stretch over the vast area that they compose. For mule deer, breeding season usually lays over November and December, with a 7-month gestational period that usually ends up with 1 or 2 fawns produced. Mule deer are very much like cows in their feeding habits, as they are herbivores and also have 4 compartmental stomachs, and they migrate in colder months down to the southern United States to warm and have larger plethora of food available to them. The white-tailed deer is another deer species found within the Pacific Northwest, up to Alaska. They are the smallest known deer species within the northwest regions of the Americas. The white-tailed deer have a very easy-to-understand name, much like the mule and black-tailed deer, as they have a white undertail that is very distinctive, much like their cousins' ears are. Breeding season for this animal lasts from October to December, with a 7 to 8 month gestational period producing 1 to 2 fawns. Being similar to the mule deer as well, the white-tailed deer is an herbivore and a browser, eating any kind of twig, leaf, grass, or other plants that they can get their mouths on, much like the mule deer. So, to know, the biggest difference between these two deer starts at their antlers. A white-tailed deer will have one main shaft of antler with several prongs coming off, whereas the black-tailed deer forks at the beginning of the shaft, creating many different branches of antlers. The mule deer has very large pointed ears, whereas the white-tailed deer has smaller ears that are rounded at the tips. Mule deer are also typically larger, both in height and body weight. However, the largest difference is also their tails. Mule deer have a black-tipped tail, while a white-tailed deer has a very distinctive solid white with the brown that mixes on top. Kamiak Butte has been shaped into the landmass that it is today from over 1.4 million years ago to now. with quartzite and plate tectonics helping to form the shape it's in, to the climate and weather allowing only certain plants and animals to live in this ecosystem, to finally shaping how the north and south-facing sides are different kinds of ecosystem. Kamiak Butte is a place that should be visited and protected. The different plants should be visually beheld, and the many different types of animals roaming this landscape should be admired. With all these factors, Kamiak Butte is a landscape of history.